impacts for 100+ years to come. We know that water levels in Lake Mead remain on the decline, and as we will hear later, will continue to fall as we realize the poor runoff from this year's hydrology. And we must confront the realities that we face in these challenging times. A crucial water supply that has been in structural decline, and a river that has faced the strain of overuse while climate change leaves our watersheds parched. The Colorado River is part of the fabric of Arizona. It supports our on-river communities who rely on it completely. It nourishes the Yuma County agriculture that provides winter greens and produce to the world. The Colorado River flows through the desert to central and southern Arizona, fueling our growing cities that millions call home, and the advanced manufacturing industries that are critical for the national security and future of our country. 22 of the Colorado River Basin's 30 sovereign tribal nations are within Arizona and deserve access to secure and reliable water for their homelands for centuries more. Perhaps more than any other state, we have so much at stake with the health of the Colorado River. Moving forward, we're going to have to grapple with the fact that Mother Nature is going to provide us with less. But this isn't a surprise to us. For years, we have been taking steps to adapt to a changing water supply, and for years, the lower basin states have implemented programs that have sought to address these challenges and to improve the health of the river. These efforts include the development of the Drought Contingency Plan, reducing water use to provide millions acre-feet of water savings to Lake Mead, and most recently, the 2023 Lower Basin States proposal to conserve an additional 3 million acre-feet in the reservoir over 3 years. We must continue to build on this as we revisit the Colorado River's future in post-2026 process. We have already put real water on the table for our Lower Basin proposal, and we will make sure that our neighbors in the Upper Basin do not shirk their responsibilities when it comes to reducing their water use to protect the river. With these great challenges come great opportunities, and in Arizona, we face our water challenges head on. As a state, we'll continue our legacy of leadership on water management as we move forward through this post-2026 process. We have the tools and we have the vision to do so. We will forge partnerships between cities, agriculture, tribes, and industry. We will build infrastructure. We will increase water recycling. We will increase recharge. We will continue our culture of conservation and improve our irrigation efficiencies. We will shed the thinking of the past that has limited us and implement new policies and programs that are up to the task that faces us. And all of you here today are critical to the success of this mission. As ARC members, you are here to help formulate Arizona's policy positions on the Colorado River to ensure our collective success. You are charged with the duty to represent not only your organizations, but your sectors and your regions. And all of you are here today because you're leaders participating in a larger cause on behalf of the state of Arizona. And I ask you to remember this as you bring solutions and creativity to the table. Your contributions will bring us forward to the next chapter of Arizona's water future, where we build on the lessons we have learned and our generations of success in water management. It's not going to be easy, but important things never are. On behalf of the state, I want to thank you for your participation in this critical process. And with that, I am going to leave you here in the capable hands of Tom and Brenda. As you may be aware, we're wrapping up a budget at the state capitol, I hope. And so I've got to get back to that, but hope you have a great rest of the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Governor Hobbs. We're honored for you to attend this committee meeting. I'll jump right in and say good afternoon to everyone. As you know, my name is Brenda Berman. I am General Manager of the Central Arizona Project. I am joined by my colleague and co-chair, Tom Buschatzke, Director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources. We are also honored to have today the Department of the Interior's Acting Assistant Secretary for Water and Science, Mr. Scott Cameron, here in attendance with us. We are also joined by the Bureau of Reclamation's Area Manager for the Boulder Canyon Operations Office, Mr. Dan Bunk. Please raise your hand, Dan. We will hear from both Scott and Dan in the first half of our agenda. Thank you for being here. This is a hybrid meeting. Thank you all, so many of you, for being here in person, but we also have delegates or alternates who are attending virtually. For those of you who are online, it is hard to see you, so our folks, Ms. Miller, will be helping and direct us there. So we are also broadcasting this meeting to the public. It will be recorded. It will be posted on the websites of the Department of Water Resources and the Central Arizona Project. The general public does not have an opportunity to participate during the meeting, but there will be an opportunity for the public to submit questions and comments at the end of the meeting. And for Mr. Cameron's benefit, maybe to introduce him to this large group of leadership in water leadership in Arizona, Ms. Miller, would you please call the roll?
Yes, I will. And I'd also like to note that some of the legislative members are busy currently in committees, so hopefully they'll be able to join us shortly. This is in alphabetical order. Patrick Adams, Office of the Governor.
Present.
Alexandra Arboleda, CAWCD Board.
Present.
Gretchen Baumgardner, City of Scottsdale Water.
Present.
Rebecca Burnett, Arizona Water Banking Authority.
Present.
John Bolts, Arizona Farm Bureau.
Present.
Michael Boulay, City of Surprise Water Resources Management.
Present.
Brenda Berman, CAP.
Present.
Tom Buschatzke, ADWR.
Present.
Barbara Chappell, City of Goodyear Public Works.
Present.
Maria Dadgar, Intertribal Council of Arizona.
Present.
I don't believe Billy Elkins, Arizona Cattle Growers Association. Okay. Sandy Favorites, Freeport McMoran.
Present.
Chairwoman Amelia Flores, Colorado River Indian Tribes.
Present.
Jordi Fuentes, Arizona Power Authority.
Present online.
Paul Gardner, City of Queen Creek.
Present.
Terry Goddard, CAWCD Board of Directors.
I'm here.
David Godlewski, Southern Arizona Home Builders Association. Laura Grignano, CAGRD.
Present.
Joe Geisel, Epcor Water, U.S. Dan Jones.
Online, present.
Thank you. Dan Jones, Pinal County Agriculture. Chairman Verlin Jose, Tohono O'odham Nation. Spencer Camps, Home Builders Association of Central Arizona.
Present.
Cal Sheehy, Mojave County.
Here.
Asia Philbin, City of Tucson Water.
Here.
Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis, Gila River Indian Community.
Present.
Chairman Gabriel Lopez, Akchin Indian Community. Ted Maxwell, Southern Arizona Leadership Council.
Present online.
Leslie Myers, Salt River Project.
Present.
Kevin Moran, Environmental Defense Fund.
Present.
Megan Scott, Yuma County Agriculture.
Present.
Joe Olson, Metropolitan Domestic Water Improvement District.
Present.
Nicole Petker, City of Mesa Water Resources.
Present.
Clark Princell, Valley Partnership.
Present.
Rusty Ray, Phoenix AMA Agriculture.
Here.
Fred Schneider, Arizona Water Company.
Present.
Danny Seiden, Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Grant Hanna, AZ Senate, State Senate.
Present.
Alex Smith, United States Bureau of Reclamation.
Present.
Max Wilson, City of Phoenix Water Services.
Present.
Peter Abraham, Pima County Agriculture, Sawa. And Gail Griffin has now joined us. So Representative Gail Griffin, Arizona State House of Representatives.
Present for a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Perhaps just a few details for the meeting, and it looks like we're all pretty good at it. But I'll just remind everyone to please turn on your microphone when it's time to speak. Either Tom or I will call on you, or Ms. Miller, if you're virtual, will call on you. Those of you who are virtual, please remain on mute until called upon. As the quirk of our system, only 3 microphones can be on at once, so when you're done speaking, please turn it off. That will be very useful. But I will also say, just as we get to logistics, I would like to welcome 2 of our new member delegates, and I'm not sure we heard he was here, but Chairman Gabriel Lopez, Chair of the Auction Indian Community, has joined the Arizona Reconsultation Committee, and also we welcome Megan Scott from the Yuma Area Agriculture. Welcome to both of you. And also, I'm sorry, Max Wilson from City of Phoenix. To facilitate our communication today, participants joining us online are asked to use the raise hand feature, and that is on Teams. And you can, if you go over to where it lists participants, you will see the ability to raise your hand. We also ask that you unraise your hand if your question's been answered or if you've already spoken. Let's see. As we said, the public will be able to submit comments. We've got it up there on the screen. But you would submit those public comment form at cap-az.com/ARC. And that public comment period will be at the end of the meeting, and we'll acknowledge any comments or questions at that time. Today's meeting materials will be posted again on the ARC website. That is from both DWR and CAP. Of note, every once in a while, something can happen when we're dealing with so much virtual and electronics and software. We do have backup procedures, particularly for those of you who are attending online. Please watch your email. If something were to happen to the Teams system, you look for an email from Jen Miller, and we will provide backups instructions for what we do from there. On to the agenda. We have a very full agenda today. We will try to work swiftly, but these are important subjects, and we will need our full time, I think, at least. If we have scheduled a break in the middle, as you can see, to stretch your legs and to come back focused for the new information we plan on sharing with you this afternoon. After the break, we'll discuss several aspects of the post-2026 Colorado River process and where things stand with the other basin states. And we have ample opportunity at the end of the meeting, and we sincerely hope you will share your thoughts with us and with Acting Assistant Secretary Cameron. We wanted to start today by talking about what Arizonans have done so far. And this is whether you are a city, whether you are a tribe, whether you are agriculture, whether you are industry. Across Arizona, we have done incredible work in the last 10 years, but more particularly in the last few, to consistently conserve water to protect Lake Mead and the entire river system. While many of you already are aware of the volumes that we have accomplished, we did want to share this, especially today, to highlight for Assistant Secretary Cameron the good works that Arizona has accomplished. So this graphic is meant to show the water that just Arizonans, and we know we have partners in California and Nevada water users as well. But this is just Arizona, what we have conserved year by year. So when we first started to recognize back in 2013 and 14 that the river system may need more than the 2007 guidelines, Arizonans stepped up and saved over 100,000 acre feet. And you can look all the way forward, starting in 2020, when Arizona started to put non-compensated water into Lake Mead. That is the more purple area. And that is sometimes mandatory, and those were sometimes voluntary, but they were non-compensated water in the purple area. You can see the last several years, working with the United States, we were able to accomplish totals of over 800 and 900,000 acre-feet per year. All told, both mandatory, non-compensated, and compensated water, Arizonans have stepped up and saved over 5.5 million acre-feet in the last 10 years. That is an incredible number. We'll go forward and explain how important that is. But just alone from Arizona, that is about 81 feet in Lake Mead. As I said, this was from a diverse set of partners who have all worked together with the United States, with Central Arizona Project, with the state of Arizona. And so just to give you an idea, and if we missed anyone, tell us, because I'll be very embarrassed. We've tried to do our homework here, but an incredible number of diverse interests bringing water to the table to make sure that we do our part, that the Colorado River is stable and able to be there for all of us. This is, not surprisingly, the parallel to having this extraordinary conservation story is that the lower basin's consumptive use has also gone down significantly. So if we look back in 2014 and down to 2023, which was a record-breaking year for us. In 2023, we used 5.82 million acre-feet of consumptive use in the lower basin, and we hadn't used that little since the 1980s. And it wasn't that we used a lot less water in the 1980s, it was that it was some of the biggest flood years we have ever seen on the Colorado River. And so we didn't need all that extra water. So this was done more by pain, by conservation, by people cutting back. But it's a significant story to look at what the lower basin has been able to do in the last 10 years. Reclamation, the Bureau of Reclamation recently held its first of many annual operating plan meetings, and that is for them to prepare to create the 2026 annual operating plan. Reclamation shared this updated information here. We've updated it, I think it was for May, we've updated it to June, and I think Dan Bunk might be even able to share some more recent numbers. But you may recall the Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement, that's the SEIS in the title, and that is for the interim period. That was meant to be, we started early in 2023, but 2024 through 2026, right up until kind of the end of the guidelines. And the lower basin together, also our partners in Mexico, together pledged that we would do 3 million acre-feet of conservation in those years. Well, if you can see the total in the bottom right, we have done that and more. So including what we expect to see in 2026, the lower basin and our partners will have done 3.6 million acre-feet of conservation. It's an incredible number. So I thank you to everyone who's participated in that. I think we should all be very proud of what we are accomplishing in the interim period. We like to call this the rainbow chart. And if I'm talking particularly to groups who may be less familiar with the Colorado River than this group, I always like to use this chart. So what this shows is back since 2006 and 2007, when we started with intentionally created surplus, meaning you could do extraordinary conservation and save that water behind Lake Mead. Since that time, this represents in Lake Mead, and you'll see on the y-axis is the elevation of Lake Mead, and on the bottom x-axis is time, since 2006 to 2024. All of that water we've saved, whether it's investing in extraordinary conservation, paying people to use less, mandatory water that Arizona has put on the table without compensation, equals over 143 feet in Lake Mead, meaning Lake Mead right now, without this conservation, would be at 921 feet. And this is the number from 6 months ago. but I think you can tell how important this water has been to the stability of Lake Mead, which also lends itself to the stability of Lake Powell and the entire river system. So kudos to all of the partners who have stepped up. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass this on to Tom.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks to all of you and all the partners who actually made all of this conservation happen and these reductions happen. And as Governor Hobbs referred to, we still have a lot more to do. And all of this, which has been a lot of a heavy lift for us, we know isn't enough, and is not enough for the future that's facing us. But now I have the great pleasure to welcome, more formally, Assistant Secretary Scott Cameron to the Arizona Reconsultation Committee meeting. Scott has 40 years of experience working inside and around the federal government. During the course of his career, Scott has worked as a staffer to Oregon Representative Jim Weaver and Nevada Senator Chick Hecht in the Office of Management and Budget, as a career civil servant, and as a political appointee in 2 administrations. He served the state of California as Washington representative on natural resource and environmental issues for former Governor Pete Wilson. Scott has also worked as a corporate government relations executive, as an executive in the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and as a government contractor for both large and small businesses, supporting federal agencies on management improvement projects. In 2014, he founded the Reduce Risks from Invasive Species Coalition, a 501c3 charity that educates the public and government on the economic, ecological, and public health impacts of invasive species. In November 2015, he was elected to local government office as a director of the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District, serving Fairfax County's 1.2 million people. He resigned those positions upon joining President Trump's administration. Scott was a Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of the Interior under the administration of President George W. Bush. He served as the department's Chief Human Capital Officer, e-government executive, led strategic planning and performance management, and was a member of the Executive Committee of the Interagency Chief Acquisition Officers Council. Previously, Scott was Deputy Chief of the Interior Branch at OMB. In that capacity, he also served as the program examiner for the U.S. Geological Survey and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Earlier at OMB, he oversaw EPA's Office of Water and the Office of Research and Development. Scott began his career as a presidential management intern in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service after earning a BA in biology from Dartmouth College and an MBA from Cornell University. So Scott, that's an impressive resume, and you're going to need it to deal with all the issues facing us on the Colorado River. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you for your remarks, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much, Tom. After listening to that introduction, no wonder I feel old. So, but I want to start off by acknowledging Governor Hobbs for her commitment and leadership on Colorado River issues. I want to thank my friend of many years, Brenda Berman, for her role in many capacities dealing with the Colorado over quite a few years. And I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Tom Buschatzke. I've known Tom since 2017. He's incredibly knowledgeable. He's incredibly smart. He really understands Arizona water, and you are all lucky to have him as the governor's representative on these issues. Normally, I speak extemporaneously, but Arizona is important. Arizona water is even more important. So for the first time in several decades, I actually have detailed notes that I'm speaking from. So I want to start off by describing my interaction with Secretary Burgum fairly early on in the administration when we talked about Colorado River. He gave me 3 very clear directions. The first is he expects his political leadership, and for the time being at least I'm the personification of that, to be intensely, consistently, and constantly involved with the 7 basin states to try to find a path forward on the Colorado. Second, he really wants a 7-state solution. He wants an agreement that the 7 governors are comfortable with. or at least find acceptable. I suppose when you're dealing with water issues, you're never comfortable. Thirdly, acknowledging his role as a water master on the lower basin, he's prepared to make a decision if there is no seven-state agreement. He also, as you may know, has some influence over federal projects in the upper basin. So he's got a number of tools and responsibilities. Today, I'd like to provide 3 points in my presentation. First, I want to give you some information about the federal process ahead associated with the Colorado River. Second, I want to offer some personal observations about the future management of the Colorado that I've developed after meeting with the 7 states about every other week for a day or 2 at a time since April 8th. Third, I want to offer you some questions that I hope you will ask yourselves about the future of the Colorado. So, first, the process. We're a federal agency. We have to do environmental impact statements on virtually everything that we do. So, we are going to be doing an environmental impact statement on the future of the Colorado. We are framing the alternatives in the draft DIS incredibly broadly with the input from Tom and his 6 colleagues, so that whatever imaginable 7-state deal we hope they all come up with will fit within the boundaries of our draft DIS and therefore withstand any legal scrutiny. We plan on publishing the draft in December of this year with a public comment period into the winter of 2025-26. We anticipate having a record of decision signed by the Secretary in May or June of 2026. Our goal is to essentially parachute a 7-state deal into the EIS as the preferred alternative in March or maybe earlier, hopefully earlier, 2026. There are some constraints on our timing. The first is that the Lake Powell water year begins on October 1. The Lake Mead water year, December 1. We anticipate that Congress will have to do something to lock in a 7-state deal. They're on notice. We've talked to the congressional staff of the delegation and let them know that we may ask them to do something, not knowing what that something is quite yet. We also realize that the Arizona legislature may have to do something to lock in a 7-state deal, and quite frankly, other states may as well, Colorado, for instance. So, what is Interior doing? We are showing up in force. We are providing modeling support. We're trying to create a negotiating space where the 7 states can experiment with new ideas or question old preconceptions that may no longer be valid. We're carefully husbanding available federal cash in case it is needed to help seal a 7-state deal. We are respecting our trust responsibility with the 30-plus tribes across the basin and looking for ways to actively involve them in the future of the basin. Next, I want to share some of my personal observations as a very interested, if not quite as well-informed observer as Tom. There's a lot less water in the Colorado system than people thought there was going to be 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 10 years ago. That's the new reality. And we all have to live in the physical world as it is, not the world as we hope it might have been. There are real risks to both the lower basin states and the upper basin states if we don't collectively do something differently than we've done in the past. There will almost certainly be residual risks to all 7 states even after we arrive at a new deal. But there are things that can be done to mitigate those risks. More specifically, I believe Arizona has options if you are imaginative enough and willing to act on them. Tribes in Arizona and elsewhere can and should and want to be part of the solution. We need to find contractual, financial, regulatory, and legislative ways to help them help the rest of us. Arizona has millions of acre-feet of groundwater in various places. That groundwater somehow needs to be part of a long-term solution for the state. The state legislation may be necessary to facilitate that. Across the Colorado Basin, agriculture uses around 80% of the water. So agriculture somehow needs to be part of a solution. About 80% of Arizona's population is served by the Central Arizona Project, but the CAP and its customers generally don't have senior water rights. Having senior water rights is a wonderful thing, but having senior water rights does not give you a free pass to ignore what's happening in the greater community. So some questions I'd like to put out on the table for you, hopefully all to consider in the weeks ahead, in no particular order. Are Arizona's farmers willing to step forward now and be part of a solution for your state before the junior water rights holders face a crisis? What can you all do together to make it easier to lease, exchange, or transfer water inside Arizona? Are you interested in exploring what changes in law, regulation, policy, or simply old habits need to be made to transfer, lease, or exchange water across state lines? For instance, the San Diego County Water Authority now has excess water due to a successful desal program and conservation. They want to put that water to good use somewhere. Would Arizona be interested in that water? Similarly, Interior is going to execute a memorandum agreement with the proponents of the Cadiz project in Southern California. The Cadiz sponsors think they have a lot of groundwater that could go somewhere. If it turns out they are right, would Arizona want to have a conversation about that water? Does Arizona have the legislative and regulatory framework and infrastructure in place to effectively manage the groundwater you've stored so you can appropriately take advantage of it when you need it in the future? And you may need it not in the great distant future. You may need it sooner than the distant future. Finally, how do Arizona tribes participate in the state's water future? I've frankly really been impressed by my conversations with the tribes to date. They've been imaginative, they've been creative, they're thinking outside the box, they want to be part of the solution. And in a number of cases, they have senior water rights. In other cases, they've got really smart people with junior water rights. And I think you need to tap into those human and hydrological resources across the tribes. So those are my observations and my questions. In closing, I want to assure you that the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Reclamation remain committed to working with Arizona and the other 6 basin states to help you find a collective path forward for the 40 million people who live in or depend on the Colorado River. We are eager to partner with you to identify and pursue options to improve water supply reliability in Arizona and across the Colorado watershed. That commitment includes contributing our time, expertise, acting as an honest broker, and yes, I wouldn't be surprised if that also can include some carefully targeted federal money. Finally, I urge you to continue to work with Tom, embrace his leadership, and give him the freedom of maneuver to strike an appropriate deal with his 6 colleagues in the other states so that Arizona and the other states can move forward on your own terms. If you can't get there, Secretary Burgum is prepared to exercise his authority as watermaster and make decisions himself. That is clearly not his preference. Thank you for your time. If it's appropriate, I'm happy to answer questions now or later.
So Scott, I think according to the agenda, we'd love to have the hydrology update from Dan Bunk first, and then before the break, we'll have comments and questions on the topics we've covered so far, if that works.
That sounds great. Dan,
Thank you.
Looks like you're up.
Okay. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Cameron and Tom and Brenda and the committee. I appreciate being here. I realize it's been a while since I've spoke to this group. It seems like the last time I did this was during a shortage preparedness briefing. So I think unfortunately I tend to show up when there maybe isn't such good news. I do think the conservation activities that Brenda, General Manager Berman walked through are the good news. And we'll talk a little bit more just to sort of close out my slides, because I I do think there's been a tremendous amount of effort that's been going on in the lower basin and with our colleagues in Mexico on the conservation side of things. But before we get to that, again, we'll have to talk a little bit about hydrology, which is not good news at this point in time. So next slide, please. Okay. So just current conditions for Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Lake Powell's currently at elevation 3562. It's about 20 feet lower than what it was when we started the water year for Lake Powell back in October 1st. It is about 40 feet higher than its lowest point back in water year 2022 when we had those 3 really dry back-to-back years in the Colorado River Basin. It's currently at 34% of capacity. Lake Mead's at about elevation 1056. It's about 10 feet or so lower than where it started this water year. Typically, Lake Mead declines during the spring and early summer months when the water use is at the highest. It'll sort of level out now through the end of the calendar year, and we're projecting it to end the year at about 1056. 33% capacity. Combined, Powell and Mead, they're about 1/3 full. And for the total system storage, that includes the other system reservoirs, about 40% of capacity, down about 3% from this time last year. Although when we look at what we're projecting for the inflow into Lake Powell, that total system storage will start to go down as the year progresses. Next slide. This is a slide that shows our snowpack and what the current inflow forecasts are for Lake Powell as of June. The snowpack peaked at about 92% of median back on March 23rd, which doesn't sound too bad. 92% is pretty close to average. But since that time, we've seen about half of the runoff not materialize. So as the year has gone on, we're actually forecasting about 93% of average runoff back in the beginning of January. Now it's at 45% for the April through July period and 54% for the water year. So now this is among, again, one of the lowest, assuming that this is where we end up for the year, which seems pretty likely because I haven't seen anything on the precip side of things in June that are very hopeful, but this will mean it's like one of the driest, one of the 5 driest years over the past 50 or 60 years or so. So it's very similar to like what we had back in 2012 and 2013, not quite as bad as what we had back in 2002. And so the next slide actually shows the unregulated inflow into Lake Powell since Powell initially started filling. So since 1964, the 3 kind of more colored bars at the end of the chart, which is the red, the green, and the blue, that's the minimum probable, most probable, and maximum probable inflows. Those are all right around 50% of average. And when I looked at this chart earlier this week, I could only find maybe about 3 or 4 years that came in lower than that. So what this means is that after 2023, which helped us after that really 3-year dry period in 2020 through 2022. Now we're sort of back into our trend of below average inflows again. Last year's inflow was about 80% of average, and this year we'll end up somewhere around 50% of average or so. Next slide. Okay, so this is a slide that shows projections for Lake Powell from our June 24-month study run. There's 2 different types of projections that are shown here. We've got those 3 dash lines, or the 3 dash lines on the plot, the blue, the green, and the red, which are line up with those inflow forecasts that we showed on the previous slide. So those are our, quote, our 24-month study runs. Those are essentially the operational projections. And then overlaying with that in the background are the 30 traces from what we call our stream flow ensemble forecast, which is what we do to kind of try to look at a broader range of outcomes. So in looking at this plot, all of Lake Powell's projections, except for the one that maximum probable plot, but that one was from back in April, are showing that in 2026, Lake Powell would operate in what's called the mid-elevation release tier. It's the same operating tier that Powell's operating in this year. This year's Powell is releasing 7.48 million acre feet. So that would mean next year Powell would release 7.48 million acre feet as well. With one really highly significant caveat is that under the 2024 supplemental EIS, there's a provision that was added, 6.E, which could allow Powell's release to go below 7.48 million acre feet. If Lake Powell's elevation is projected to be below elevation 3,500 within the 12-month period, so there's a lot of nuances with that. But in looking at this particular plot, the red dashed line on the bottom shows what that elevation would be. And so it does show it by about the end of September of 2026, dropping below 3,500. So what that means is that we haven't triggered 6.E in the SCIS. That trigger is essentially a consultation trigger among the 7 states. It's not to say that the operation automatically would change as a result of that provision being triggered. It would open up a planning process that would involve significant consultation. It doesn't preclude any operational decision or any change to Powell's release. It doesn't also preclude the potential for drought response operations in the upper basin that would most likely be a part of any type of drought response to keep Powell above 3,500. But what the model projections show is that there's a chance that by later this year, we could be triggering that process. It'll be a new process. We haven't implemented that provision yet. Quite honestly, we were hoping we wouldn't have to before the end of 2026. We wanted to roll into a post-26 period without having to go through that process. But what you'll see with these plots is that I don't have them today in the slides, but for those that get our 24-month study updates and our ensemble, we call them the ESP run, our probabilistic forecast updates, we're providing 2 sets of plots, one that show in that cloud plot a constrained Lake Powell release and the impacts on Lake Mead downstream, and an unconstrained Powell release and essentially no impact on Lake Mead. And then we'll be, as the time goes on, if that minimum probable does trigger section 6.E out of the SCIS, then we'll implement and roll up that process as needed. So heading into 2026, mid-elevation release tier seems very likely again in 2026. Another dry year like this year, or a dry year like 2002, or one of those really dry years, has the potential to trigger 6.E. If we don't have that type of dry year, we wouldn't trigger that provision, and the release would just remain 7.48 as we go into the post-26 period. Next slide. So here's the equivalent slide for Lake Mead. So we've got, again, those 3 24-month study runs, the blue dash, the green dash, and the red dashed. Just the simple stuff is in 2026, all of our traces are showing a tier 1 shortage again in the lower basin, so there won't be any surprises there in terms of how we're operating. The conservation activities that we've been working on all these years that Brenda walked through, in particular these last 4 years, have been enough to kind of keep Mead propped up enough where we're not going to go into deeper levels of shortage within that 07 guidelines interim period. So we're good for 2026. The only concerning thing on here again is what happens next year if we have another really bad year of hydrology in the upper basin in 2026. And if that provision in the SCIS gets triggered, that makes us look at Powell's release in 2026. And so that's what the lower part of the cloud is showing here. There's another version of this plot that doesn't show that drop for Lake Mead, and so that's sort of the uncertainty that we're dealing with as we head into 2026 and see how the hydrology unfolds. Next slide. All right, so I really like Vanitha's table much better. She had 8 numbers to kind of show this. I've got something like 80 numbers, so I apologize for that. But all it is really a breakdown of that table that was shown previously, breaking it down by state, by water user, entity, tribe, all the additional conservation that's taken place since 2003. Most of it under the SCIS. I do have a couple numbers that are included in here that weren't in the previous table that would fall under the drought contingency plan, because believe it or not, the U.S. is still trying to conserve water in the DCP as well. So my number is slightly different, and it shows about 3.7 million acre feet over that 4-year period conserved by the 3 states, much of it by Arizona water users and tribes. Next slide. And just don't want to leave out the efforts, because it was a significant amount of effort to come to an agreement with Mexico on minute 330 so that Mexico could do its own additional conservation that's on top of what's required under minute 323, on top of what's similar to how those additional conservation is in addition to what's required under the guidelines in DCP. And so Mexico's on track to conserve 400,000 acre feet in this 3-year period, 24, 25, and 26. They conserved 133,000 acre feet last year as planned. They're on track to conserve another 200,000 this year, and then they'll make the balance of that up in 2026. So a lot of work went into this agreement as well, so I don't want to forget our colleagues in Mexico and make sure that we recognize their efforts as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dan, I think. Dan is a very courageous person, as you can tell, to get up and give us this type of information. So before I move on to the comment section, I want to recognize Tone Autumn Nation Chairman Merlin Jose joined us. Welcome. Perhaps it's best to start with comments and questions for Dan's presentation, and then we can move to comments and questions for Scott or for Brenda on the presentation regarding the conservation. So delegates around the table, any comments or questions for Dan on his hydrology presentation? I'm not seeing any. How about any delegates online? There, we have a hand raised, I think.
Yes, Jordi Fuentes would like to make a comment or question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jordi.
Thank you. Thanks and Tom and Brenda, thanks for holding this this meeting today. We appreciate it. The question is for Dan. If you can go to the Lake Mead, or Hoover slides, just a few before. Yes, right there. Dan, I see that you have 1035 elevation listed here. That's kind of the new, a newer issue related to some of the technology constraints at Hoover and the ability to pass water through the hydropower turbines. Can you talk a little bit about where the mindset of the Bureau is and how you guys are going? I understand that there's going to be some modeling that will take place and account for this, but just from a strategy perspective, how are you looking at this new constraint of 1035?
Okay, thanks for that question. So just a little bit of background. So late last year into early this year, we worked with our technical service center on low water operations at Lake Mead, in particular for the hydropower plant at Hoover. about 10 years prior to that, with the installation of 5 widehead turbines at Hoover and some analysis of the existing turbines, we essentially modified the minimum power pool from about 1050 down to 950. So the minimum power pool is still 950 feet. But what that TSC study found is that at around elevation 1035, the older existing turbines may not be able to operate below that elevation. They may suffer significant cavitation damage. And so as a result of that, that elevation 1035 has become significant now, because that's a point at which we may have to take 12 out of the 17 turbines offline at Hoover. So it's a drop of about 1,300 megawatts down to about 380 megawatts just from that change in capacity. So what our folks at our Lower Colorado Dams office have been doing, working with WAPA, working with the Hoover power customers, is trying to analyze the benefits of installing additional widehead turbines at Hoover Dam. And so they're still working on that process now. I don't have an update I can provide on that now, but I definitely could reach out to the manager over at Hoover and get more information. But I know they're looking into it. In terms of like how we're modeling this moving forward, you'll see with our 24-month study runs, and then when we do our modeling runs for the post-2026 analysis, it'll show that drop-off in hydropower capability at 1035. And any release constraints that might be involved with Meade going below elevation 950. So there aren't release constraints above 950, but there are some below 950. So that's maybe a little bit outside of the question, but just for awareness. And I don't know if there's any other information or any further questions on that.
Yeah, Dan, can I follow up on that really quickly?
Yes.
You just stated that one of the concerns was that because you're not being able to use all of those hydropower turbines and pass water, that there may be a problem. But if what I heard you just say is you don't believe that's going to be a problem down to 950, that there'll be the ability to pass water, enough water through the dam to get down to the 950.
Yep, that's correct. So the cavitation issue is with the turbine blades only. It's not the same issue that's up at Glen Canyon Dam, where the cavitation issue is with the actual tubes, with the actual bypass tubes that the water flows through. So there's no concerns about the water being released between 950 and 1035. It's only when you get to 950 and we can't move any of the water through any turbines because we're at minimum power pool that becomes a constraint on Meade's releases.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions for Dan from delegates online? Hearing none, we can move to comments and questions for the other agenda items, either for Assistant Secretary Cameron or for General Manager Berman. Delegates in the room, questions or comments? Sandy.
Of course. Sorry. Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. And Dan, I didn't have any comments for you other than, you know, I didn't want to say boo outright, and it's not on you. So, you know, these are issues that we as Arizonans have been dealing with for a long time, not just associated with the Colorado River, but our groundwater resources, our surface water resources. You know, we have taken steps over the last century to manage supplies. There are obvious risks associated with every supply that we have, and so, you know, this is daunting, but it's not unusual for us. We have, as Tom and Brenda pointed out, and you know, sort of the list of things that we've done in Arizona for conservation efforts and the amount of water that we've saved. Sometimes it gets a bit discouraging because it's never enough, right? And the hydrology just isn't being helpful, and we've got so many things going on at the same time, and so we're getting hit from every side. Meanwhile, doing the right thing and having done the right things for a very long time. I represent Freeport-McMoran. We're a mining company here. We're also in the upper basin, so we see these issues, from every side, and we're sensitive to the issues that the upper basin and lower basin are struggling with. It's not just 40 million people. It's not just agriculture. People need jobs. We've got industry here, mining. 70% of the copper, over 70% of the copper that's produced in the United States comes out of the Colorado River Basin. We have one smelter that's operating that can process that. We have taken steps within our own operations to reduce our use of freshwater resources to the tune of recycling 90% of the processed water that we've got. We've taken steps to do the right things, and yet it's still not enough. We've got to keep going and keep giving, and we recognize that. We're willing to answer your questions earlier. We're willing to partner. We're willing to help solve solutions. All these sources of water are our future, though. I mean, in the future of copper production, and that's medical, that's pipes, that's technology, it's renewable energy, it's renewables, all across the board. These things will definitely have a major, the decisions that are made will have a major and significant impact on our industry going forward, and everybody's industry. I'm not saying that we're any more important than any other person in here, and that's why, yes, of course, we're willing to give up just a little more, to do a little more, to help with water users and collaborate. What we're lacking is we really haven't taken steps, in many instances, to identify those collaborative efforts. We're starting to have conversations amongst water users on how we can collaborate with each other. Can we deliver wet water to a water treatment facility so that they can operate their water treatment facilities adequately in exchange for maybe some credits so that we can operate our mine 50 years in the future? We plan for 100+ years, and we're looking at the future holistically, but not without understanding that we're going to have to do more to help. We want to make sure that that's done equitably across the basin. We want to make sure that any decisions that come out of Interior, whether it's the Secretary or the 7 basins coming together and coming up with a collaborative solution, that it is truly collaborative and equitable, and that we aren't taking on yet more of the burden that we've already taken on. In addition, some of these efforts are public-private partnerships. And while we can do things, public entities can do things across the board with assistance, federal monies, those types of things. Typically when a private gets involved, that gets a little more tricky. And so I would hope that the administration would look to, facilitating these public-private partnerships, or even private-private partnerships to solve these long-term solutions. Like I said, we will work with others. We will continue to work with others. We're already talking to others and trying to come up with solutions. We just need a little more help from the state and from the federal government to get these things across the board. We don't necessarily have the instruments in place to do that. There's some uncertainty about whether we can move water across state lines, all those things. Want to be careful about precedent, obviously, but this is a basin. It's not Arizona by itself. And so, we're open to those conversations and those collaborative cross-basin, cross-state solutions, and would hope that we could get both financial and, policy support from our states and our, the federal government. One last thing, and I'm sorry I'm dragging on, but, we really need to look at augmentation. And that's, it's a hard thing to swallow. It's a hard thing to say. People don't like it. We got to take care of, we got to reduce our use. We've got to do all those things. We've done that. Augmentation is our next step, and we need help doing that. So I appreciate your comments and really appreciate the administration stepping in, and look forward to any collaboration that we can partner with.
Thanks, Sandy. Other delegates? Max.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you again for everybody for scheduling this here today. It's a great opportunity to have Assistant Secretary Cameron here with us. I think the fact of the matter is that if we went around this table, we could all tell you a story of great and immense pain of how we got to that 5 million acre feet of water conservation. Each one of us has a story of how we've got there. But the fact of the matter is, given the horrifying hydrologies that we were shown a moment ago, it hasn't worked, right? Ultimately, the dams are continuing to, their water levels in the dams are continuing to decline. And so I think the challenge for all of us here in the basin, all of us here in this room, is to figure out, what are we going to do more than what we're doing today? Because ultimately, what we're doing today, locally as well as across the basin, isn't enough. And I hope that that's a conversation that Arizona can continue to lead in. It's a conversation that the lower basin states have already led in by putting real water on the table relative to what we're doing already, right? And I think that's the challenge that we should be extending within the state and across the states as we move forward, is what are you going to do more than you're doing right now? So with that, thank you again for being here today. We really appreciate everybody's time.
Thanks, Max. Any other delegates in the room? Any delegates online?
Tom, if I could, I'd like to react to a couple of those comments. First of all, to our friends in the mining industry. Mining is very important to this administration. Is very important to the secretary. Under President Trump, the Secretary of Interior first became a member of the National Security Council. So he is constantly worried about critical and strategic minerals and our dependency on not necessarily friendly countries and other parts of the world. And the mining industry has a significant role, not just in terms of employment, but in terms of national security, frankly. So we're really interested in committing to growing the American mining industry, which I think it's fair to say has been perhaps rather aggressively regulated and perhaps not always appropriately regulated in the past. Appreciate the fact that you're in both basins. That may prove useful at some point in time in terms of additional lines of communication. I mentioned to a number of the municipal representatives this morning. I think I also mentioned to Governor Hobbs that if there are things the federal government can stop doing to make deals easier to accomplish in the state, let us know what those are. If there are things the federal government can positively do, can take positive action on to make it easier for public-private partnerships or public-public partnerships or private-private partnerships, let us know what they are. When Secretary Bergen was governor of North Dakota, he delighted in tearing up red tape. So I'm sure he would jump at an opportunity to have his Department of the Interior make it easier for Arizona to get where Arizona needs to be. And the same is true of the other 6 states, of course, in the basin. So open invitation to tell us what to do differently or what to stop doing or what to start doing. Really want to hear that. And I do think that augmentation is part of the solution. There are some, I think, very good discussions about Bartlett Dam, for instance. And, I mentioned the possibility of perhaps water out there in California somewhere that maybe could come east under the right set of conditions. And so I acknowledge the good work that's been done in the past, and none of that has been a failure. Perhaps what we need to do is think about things that we haven't tried in the past, or how to get some regulatory or bureaucratic obstacles out of our way, so we can let the engineers do the engineering thing and actually, deliver water to people. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And for everyone's knowledge, I'll just say Scott and I have talked about other things in that regard, kind of in the lower area of the river in the Yuma and Imperial Valley area. There's some opportunities there through efficiencies in infrastructure to maybe leverage some of the water supplies there. Scott is standing up a process with Mexico to talk about the salinity issues and the salinity minute of the treaty 242 and the salinity requirements that attached to minute 330 as well. So there are lots of moving parts, and I think we're hearing that it's about cobbling a lot of small things together. There's no big thing on the horizon. So I will just say before we take a break, thank you again to Scott. Having been someone sitting around the table rather than at the head of the table, it's always really impactful when people in the room can give comments to those of us who are not in the room. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, both the more formal and your personal observations. So with that, we have 10 minutes to take a break, and we will start promptly at 3:20. We're going to turn the microphones back on then.
So just real quick, there are some refreshments at the back of the room if you'd like to take a look. Thank you.